Well, I am grateful for the opportunity to come and speak with you. Being half of a clergy couple, we don't get to see each other's people in our churches. So the way we address that is every once in a while, Jeff and I switch churches just so we can see the people that our spouses are ministering to and get to know them. So I'm grateful for this opportunity to be here with you and to spend this time together and to also explore the stories of these extraordinary women from Scripture. I am. When it comes to these women, so often the things that they contribute to God are something outside of the usual norms of society in their time. The expectation of women so much in the Bible is what they can contribute is by bearing children. And that's not a bad thing necessarily until it becomes the only thing. And what I'm grateful for about the stories of these women is that they contribute to God's plans and purposes beyond childbearing in the ways that they are each uniquely gifted to do so. Now, having children in a family is a wonderful thing. I've got children of my own. But I am also grateful that I have other gifts that are accepted and celebrated in the church. And we do that with so many women as well as men. So we're talking about Mary today. She's Mary Magdalene, the loyalist, we call her in this series. Now, when it comes to sports loyalties, my husband Jeff and I are a house divided. And, I always have to troll him whenever I come here to preach because I know he's doing the same at Southgate. We both love baseball, but we are loyal to different teams. I grew up in the St. Louis area, and so I have always been a proud St. Louis Cardinals fan. All right? Best team in baseball ever. But my husband, and I think he really became a Royals fan more when he learned I was a Cardinals fan just to irritate me. I kind of suspect that. But he is a Royals fan. Yeah. I'm going to be watching you guys. Okay. But he no matter what trials and tribulations we go through, he remains loyal to the Royals. I remain loyal to the Cardinals. And I've gotten one of our children on my side. Our older son, he loves baseball and he loves the Cardinals, but he also loves the Red Sox, which I'm not sure where that comes from, but I'll have to live with that. Our younger son, he doesn't care much about baseball at all, but I'm working on him. But here's the thing, Jeff is outnumbered in our household. He is outnumbered when it comes to favorite teams. And even though the record shows the superiority of the Cardinals team over any others, he still remains a loyal Royals fan. And I have to say, I admire loyalty. It's an admirable quality. We pour our loyalty into our sports team. If baseball isn't your thing, maybe there's another sports team that's your thing, or favorite artists and authors. We pour our loyalty into our favorite brand of soda or tennis shoes. And we hopefully pour our loyalty into our most treasured relationships as well. Loyalty is something to be admired and lifted up and treasured. And loyalty is probably the most prominent trait of today's Wonder Woman that we are exploring, that we are discussing, and that is Mary Magdalene. She is one of Jesus's most loyal followers and probably one of his most misunderstood. So our best introduction to her is found in Luke chapter 8. And we're told that Jesus traveled throughout the cities and villages preaching and teaching, and that he had an entourage with him. He had the 12, we call them the 12 disciples, but there were more disciples than those 12. Along with them, women that also supported them out of their means. And so among them were Mary Magdalene, from whom 7 demons had been thrown out, Joanna, the wife of Herod's servant Chuza, Susanna, and many others who provided for them out of their resources. On a side note, I never caught this before, that through Joanna, Herod was funding Jesus' ministry. Did you catch that? Joanna was married to a servant in Herod's household who was receiving payment for, salary for serving in Herod's. Herod was funding Jesus' ministry. I find that utterly hilarious. But our focus today is on Mary, and we're told that Jesus cast 7 demons out of her. 7 demons. That's a lot. Now, we know there's a story of a guy living in a cemetery who was overcome with unclean spirits that compelled him to harm himself. And when Jesus, had a legion of demons in him that Jesus drove out into a herd of pigs. So maybe 7 isn't the most that anybody's ever had that Jesus healed, but it sure is a lot. It could mean a literal 7 different spirits in her, or the number 7 also is symbolic of completeness, wholeness. On the 7th day of creation, God rested. That was the completion of creation. So the number 7 throughout scriptures is symbolic of completion. So Mary was completely unwell, completely ill, completely overcome with her affliction. She was not well when she encountered Jesus. But through a miraculous healing, Jesus transformed her from completely unwell to completely well. He removed the demonic forces from her body and spirit and made her whole through this radical act of love. And Mary was drawn to Jesus because of this healing, because of this radical act of love. Have you experienced the radical love of Jesus in some way in your life? Have you experienced healing in your body or in your heart or in your spirit through knowing Christ? Has the gospel message brought you comfort and assurance when you needed it? Or has that same message prodded you out of complacency to act for justice and righteousness when you needed it? Jesus meets each of us where we are and addresses what we need through his radical love. And Mary's response to Jesus' radical love was to pour out radical love in support of his ministry and in support of the people Jesus was trying to reach. She had been miraculously healed, and she wanted to be a part of what Jesus was doing in the world. There are some things that we learn about Mary through the Gospels. She is mentioned in all 4 of the Gospels. And just that very fact that her name comes up in all 4. The Gospels disagree on a lot of things. They agree on a lot of things too. They agree that Mary Magdalene was part of Jesus' ministry, all 4 of them. She is referred to as Mary Magdalene. As far as what the Magdalene means, it could mean the town that she was from, a town Magdala. It could also mean a title or a nickname. The word Migdal means tower. So Magdala means a tower. So she either came from a town that was called the Tower, and a lot of different locations had towers and were referred to with a variant of that word, Migdal. Or she could have been called Mary the Tower. And there is precedent for some of Jesus' disciples to have nicknames. Simon became Simon Peter, Simon the Rock. So it's not outside the realm of possibility that Mary Magdalene was Mary the Tower, indicating her prominence amongst Jesus' followers and her understanding of who Jesus was. So there is disagreement in the academic world over what Magdalene really means. Could mean where she was from, could be a description of her character. But we know all the Gospels agree that she traveled with him, she supported him and the others through her means. We also know that she was there at the cross. She was there at the foot of the cross with other women while the men had fled and were in hiding. And she was there at the empty tomb. Of all of the 4 different Gospels, name different groups of people who were at the tomb, but Mary's name appears in all 4. All 4 Gospels agree Mary was at the empty tomb. Mary was there when everyone else had fled. Jesus can absolutely depend upon her more than anyone else, with maybe the exception of his mother, who was also there and supporting him. But despite all this, she might be one of the most misunderstood of Jesus' disciples. The fact that she is a woman and so prominent in his ministry in a world that was steeped in patriarchy, there's some struggles with accepting that, with understanding the nature of her relationship to Jesus and the others. We're still striving to understand her. In different times in history, she's been labeled a reformed prostitute or the wife of Jesus and the mother of his child, both of which we don't have evidence for. We are still striving to understand her. Recent scholarship by Dr. Elizabeth Schrader-Polzer reveals that she might be even more prominent in Jesus' ministry than we once thought. Dr. Polzer, in her undergrad research, she looked at one of the oldest manuscripts of the Gospel of John. It's called Papyrus 66. It dates to around 200 AD, so about 100 years after the Gospel was written, roughly. It's the oldest that we have, oldest copy of John that we have. It was discovered in Egypt in 1956. It's been referenced by commentaries since the 1960s. It's been around. But technology has allowed digital scans of those ancient texts to become more widely available so more scholars can see them, right? So she was viewing a digital scan of this, and she happened to notice that the wording on the manuscript did not match her Bible, particularly in the story about the raising of Lazarus. The story in John chapter 11, when Jesus is called to the tomb of Lazarus, his good friend who had died, and he had two sisters, Mary and Martha, who were upset with him because he waited too long to go visit Lazarus. And we're told it tells a miraculous story of Jesus raising Lazarus, right? But as she reads it, she notices a verse in chapter 11 that's kind of clunky. Here's how it reads in the manuscript. A certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and his sister Mary. Mary's in there twice, and there's no mention of Martha. So she zooms in, she notices that some of the letters were changed so that Mary could be Martha. There's one Greek letter difference between Mary and Martha. You change an iota to a theta, and you have Mary and Martha. So someone had scratched in a theta to change Mary to Martha, and she found evidence of this throughout this manuscript. I think maybe Jeff has mentioned some of this here previously. But Dr. Polzer continued she studied 280 transcriptions of the Gospel of John. Some of the oldest we have. 1 in 5 of those written in Greek have strange activity around Martha's name. There's indications in there that Martha's name was originally Mary. And then some of the Latin ones as well, 1 in 3. So a third of the Latin transcripts also have this activity around Martha. So what we see then is also mentions historically Tertullian, who was alive around the same time that this transcript was circulating. When he writes about this chapter in John, he only mentions Mary as the sister of Lazarus. He has no awareness of Martha. Same with another writing from that time, Egeria, who was a pilgrim at that time. She's got a journal, another ancient writing. She also, everything that Martha does in John's gospel, she attributes to Mary. So it seems like people around the same time that transcript was written down, who wrote their own interpretations of it, had no awareness of Martha being a sister of Lazarus. So there is some clues pointing to the possibility that at some point there was only one sister of Lazarus. So what's the point of this? What does this matter? Isn't this a different Mary than Mary Magdalene? Well, when you take Martha out of that story in the Gospel of John, Mary of Bethany, the sister of Lazarus, looks a lot like Mary Magdalene in her actions, in her proximity to a tomb where someone is risen, in the way that she converses. One of the most important conversations is between Jesus and what's attributed to Martha, where Martha makes this statement that I believe you are the Messiah. I believe you are the one that was promised to us. And Jesus responds, I am the resurrection and the life. So why does this matter? If Martha's not there, and if Mary of Bethany, the sister of Lazarus, is also Mary Magdalene, it means that Mary Magdalene is a central character in the Gospel of John, and she makes the confession of Jesus as Messiah, the Christ. When Simon Peter makes the same confession in the Gospel of Matthew, he is given the nickname, you are Simon Peter, the rock on whom I will build this church. It was an important statement of faith. When we put those words into Mary's mouth, we understand Mary to be a very prominent person who understood Jesus, who perceived who he was and what he was there to do. But by taking those actions and spreading them across three different women, Mary Magdalene, Mary of Bethany, and Martha, it dilutes her character. It reduces her prominence. Folks in the church, we never had disagreements, right? We never disagree in how Scripture is interpreted or who we So it is within the realm of possibility that in the early years of Christianity, there were some disagreements over who the disciples were and their level of prominence. And there may have been some who were uncomfortable with the idea of so much power and prominence and authority being given to a woman. So they began to edit some of the Gospels. I'm not here to pass judgment or to make any sort of moral judgment on those who did that, because perhaps if they didn't, the world wasn't ready for a Mary Magdalene who was of such prominence. And so the Gospel of John came to us in the form that it did, and we have the beautiful scriptures such as the Word became flesh and dwelt among us. For God so loved the world that he gave us his only Son, so that those who believed in him should never die. And more beautiful words from the Gospel of John. And I also want to state that this study is not conclusive, and there is by no means universal agreement that that's what this means. But it's just additional clues that there may be more to Mary Magdalene than we ever realized. Because if we take in the Gospel of John, the actions of Martha and Mary Magdalene and put them all in one person, it's quite the resume. She confesses Jesus as the Messiah. She anoints him in John 12, in which Jesus praises her understanding and acceptance of his death, connecting her to his tomb. She's at the foot of the cross. She's the first one to the empty tomb, the first to view the risen Jesus and to receive the instruction to go tell others about Jesus. And she is the first to tell the disciples of the resurrection. So when you put all this together, Mary is quite a prominent figure. So whoever Mary was, or what she was doing before she met Jesus, we know that her encounter with Jesus and the healing that she received from him utterly transformed her. She was a new person, and she dropped everything to follow Jesus and support his ministry. The radical love of Jesus transformed her. So think back to what I asked earlier. Have you experienced the radical love of Jesus? Have you experienced something? Have you experienced that love? And now I want to ask you, how has that love transformed you? How has that changed you? How is your life different because you know Jesus, because you know the example that he leads us in radical love and unconditional love? How is your life different? How has this love helped you through a difficult time? How has it guided you with challenging decisions or given you hope when you would have been in despair? Mary was transformed by Jesus' love and care. Not everyone that Jesus healed followed him the way Mary did. Many of them went on to live their lives grateful for what Jesus did for them, but they didn't transform their lives in the way that she did. But not only was she transformed by that love, she didn't keep it to herself. I want to take you to the empty tomb. That morning in which Mary got up very early. She gathered her supplies, the spices and the ointments, because she knew she had been there when Jesus was on the cross, and she knew that his burial was rushed. Now think about how much Jesus meant to her. Think about how her life had been transformed by him. And even though we suspect that she had some awareness that this was coming, can you imagine how devastating it would still be for her to have witnessed all of that, to have witnessed this person whom she dearly loved, who she had supported, who she had so much hope in, to be tortured and killed? And yet, she still doesn't abandon him. That early morning after the Sabbath is over, as soon as she could, within the rules of their religious practice, she got up early that next morning, brought her supplies, brought some friends with her, depending on which gospel you read. They went in preparation to do the burial rite, to do one last gift of love for Jesus, but came across something unexpected. She arrives at the tomb and it's empty. And according to the Gospel of John version, she sees the empty tomb, she's confused, she doesn't know what to do, and then she encounters somebody who she perceives to be the gardener. And she asks him, "Where did you move Jesus' body? Where is it so that I can go and I can take care of it?" And then this person says her name, says Mary. And in that moment, she hears her name, she recognizes that it is Jesus. And she responds with joy, "Rabboni!" She knows who that is. And all of a sudden, once again, her world is transformed by Jesus' love, because she has seen the impossible. Jesus is risen. And not only does Jesus show himself to her first as the risen Christ, but he gives her a job to do. He entrusts her with the gospel message. He entrusts her to go tell the other disciples, "I am alive." Jesus entrusted the first telling of the gospel message to a woman and told her to tell others, to tell the other disciples, including the men. Now, whenever someone quotes a Bible passage at you saying that women should be silent in church, you can point to this one saying, Jesus gave a woman the most important gospel message, and no one shall take it away from her. And we know that Mary did tell others. Some of them didn't believe her at first, but they came to believe in that they had their own in-person encounters with Jesus. So not only was Mary transformed by Jesus' love, she began to transform others through Jesus' love. So my final question for you this morning: who is God transforming through you, through your story? Think back on the questions I asked you. Have you experienced the radical love of Jesus? And how has that love transformed you? Your answer to those two questions is what God has called you to share with others. That is your testimony. Somebody needs to hear your story of hope and transformation so that they can connect with the story, with the gospel story. You each have your own unique stories, your own unique gifts, and God is calling you to share that with others, just as Mary did. So have you received the radical love of Jesus? How has that love transformed you? And who will be transformed through you? We are recipients of this great gift through the testimony of Mary Magdalene, who received this through the gracious and radical love of Jesus. Thanks and praise be to God for these wondrous gifts and this wonder woman. Amen.